Okay, it's 1:30. We'll call the meeting to order, and attendance is 100%.
Can everyone hear Councillor Watkins? Sorry, I can't hear him.
He's cutting in and out.
I don't know why. Same. How about now? Turn my speaker up louder. How about now?
And can you guys hear me? Okay, I just wanted to test after my failure this morning.
Okay, so are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, I don't see there are any. Is there, can somebody move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Broadhead. Those in favor? That is unanimous. Appointments, number 4 on the agenda, there are none. Item 5, approval of the minutes from the April 14th meeting. Are there any changes or errors to the minutes? Okay, I don't see any.
I'll move those.
Okay, moved by Councillor Hanson. All those in favor? That is unanimous. I guess we should note that the mayor is here as a voting member now, correct? Okay. We are now on to new business, item 6.1, AR 20-074, the 10-year municipal RMR capital plan, presented by Diane McMorty.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to both the municipal RMR and the utility RMR. So in preparation for the 2021 budget and in alignment with standard 19E and F of Council Policy CFS 05 budget and taxation guiding principles, administration is presenting the 10-year repair, maintain and replace, or RMR, municipal and utility capital plans and recommending approval of the 2021 projects. Approval of the 2021 projects earlier in the year allows for redistribution of workload during key times to ensure adequate time for preparation of RFPs. Resulting from the early prep of RFPs, attraction of increased competitive pricing and reduced purchasing costs, facilitating early application of grants so that funding is approved and available for the start of the subsequent year, and reducing the amount of information relating to the capital budget during the corporate budget process later on in the year. The associated 10-year plans alongside the detailed capital charters are provided as attachments to the 2 agenda reports being presented today, and members of administration are available for questions. That's all I have.
Okay, are there any questions of administration? Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. As I was going through this, I noted, a number of reductions related to COVID-19, and I recognize that and certainly support that. My question, though, is that when you start to deal with local roadway programs, roadway rehab, sidewalk programs, that over time there starts to develop a sort of gap between the required maintenance dollars and the ability to actually fund the program. Once COVID is over, Lord willing, that at some point in time we'll come out of that. Is there some sense of the long-term impact of this? Is this putting us behind the 8 ball for 2-3 years, or is this a 5-year recovery program post this? Because one thing that I think our people in St. Albert are proud of, quite honestly, is the way that our community is maintained. That includes roads, sidewalks, and trees, all of those things. Mr. Scoble, do you have a sense, recognizing that we have to do this now? Is there a window that we'll have to deal with less than appropriate dollars? If you understand my question, I guess.
Well, the RMR as presented generally draws from the reserves, right? And money that we've been putting away over time. So I don't think we've really challenge the RMR budget relative to COVID more than we normally would. But notwithstanding that, we had the challenges, long-term fiscal challenges that we highlighted prior to COVID. And those are perhaps exacerbated in the longer term for sure to some degree. So, you know, we may see some more revenue impacts or revenue decline than we were already expecting, you know, associated with other levels of government as again, they have to deal with COVID as well. So, you know, I wouldn't say that as presented it does, but that's not to say that our challenges we had pre-COVID are not exacerbated by that. And that's, you know, some of the work we've been doing on new revenue and of course the proposed operational review before council as well at the moment. So
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for that, because the RMR budget was actually in a deficit prior to COVID, correct? And now, to your point, the revenue deficit is just impacted further by the COVID requirements.
I'm not sure that we were in a deficit in the next couple of years, but I think there was challenges a couple of years out. I do apologize. I can't get my documents up with technology. It won't let me call the documents up. So perhaps I'll defer to Diane that she could comment exactly when we might be in, I guess, below the line, so to speak, in our
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about with the RMR funding isn't so much that we're in a deficit. It's the fact that we have great reliance on government grants to RMR. Now we do have some specific life cycle reserves for specific types of assets. And yes, some of them within the next 4 to 5 years are getting relatively depleted. We're spending faster than we're contributing to those reserves. But overall, we use a combination of our pay-as-you-go money, our grants, and our reserves to fund that RMR. And as per the council policy, you know, it would always be our priority to fund RMR before we even consider looking at growth projects. So, you know, if we had to use more, if the reserves get too low, then that means we have to use more grants in the meantime. And with, you know, potentially future grants being at risk, you know, with the new program coming out with MSI going away and knowing we're going to have reductions, that's really where the risk comes in. So when we talk about the deficit, it's really about the fact that we utilize grants and we're not self-funding our RMR, and we're relying on those other levels of government.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate that, because the bottom line here is about $2 million out of our RMR budget, and it's gonna have an impact sooner or later. So thank you for that. I appreciate those comments.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Hanson?
So thanks, Diane. Just to reiterate then, our homework for June 17th is to just go through all of this, all of these project charters, make any amendments that we see are important to us and bring them back and have a discussion with council, and then land on a final document.
Yeah, that's correct. So we picked the June 17th date if you know, council has any requested changes, and they would go forward as a postponed motion that would be debated at council. And then as the result of those motions, then we would be finalizing our RMR budget for 2021.
Okay. Great. No, I appreciate, you know, I appreciate the project charters that are in here and the level of detail that comes with the line items, because that context is so important to provide us with the whole picture. So thank you for the level of detail that's gone into this package.
Councillor Watkins, if I may, just for a minute, I'm going to log off and re-log in to see if I reboot my computer, see if I can get my documents up and running here. So I'll be back momentarily.
All right. Okay, are there any other questions of administration? Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, mine's just a curious question. So with the pandemic, we shut down all of our facilities, and we were doing some maintenance and repair work, taking the opportunity during that time to do that work. Where did we get the money from to do that? Was that just in the existing this year's RMR budget?
Yeah, so that would have been from the RMR budgets that would have been approved for 2020. and was planned maintenance. And Diane Egger can jump in if she has something to add for that. But yeah, right, we did take the opportunity to get that maintenance done ahead of time. That typically would have been done kind of in the July time period. Oh, here, I think Diane's going to jump in. So
Diane, you were doing a great job. Yes, so any work we've been doing in the facilities through the closure has been part of our 2020 RMR and our maintenance money within our existing operating budgets.
All right, so we didn't, so the work that we did this year isn't going to save us any work next year then?
The work we did this year was planned work as per the approved RMR charters. Next year's work is what we will be working towards. We need to do a little bit more analysis and costing to be prepared for next year's work. So that's what we'll hopefully do towards the end of this year, ready for projects for next year.
All right, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Hanson.
I guess this is a little bit of a subjective question, but as we go through this, we should be looking at this through need versus want versus kind of a lens, because honestly, there are some projects that will really need to get done. And I see some of these are quite expensive, and then bridge is only $5,000. So I guess, maybe just comment on the lens that we should be providing this, more of a, I'm guessing a need versus want.
Yeah, I would suggest that's kind of an interesting question, and like you said, it is kind of subjective. I mean, administration spends a fair bit of time developing their RMR charters, so I would suggest that things that are on that list couldn't really be categorized in the want category. It's repair and maintain and replace of our existing equipment, and people go through their items very, very carefully every year. So if there's opportunity, if a piece of equipment or something seems like, it could be on the slate for replacement this year, but if it looks like it can have a longer useful life, they will make those amendments and move things out, move things forward. So they're doing a pretty detailed assessment of what needs to be done. So it's a pretty concrete recommendation from administration.
Excellent. That's kind of what I wanted to hear. So that's terrific. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I guess just to follow up to that, that last question. So is that kind of what happened with the Sturgeon Reservoir? We kind of looked at it and said, you know what, we can get an extra year out of this.
We'll see. I don't know if Kate is on. Oh, she is. Good.
Can you hear me? Okay. So the Sturgeon Reservoir is an interesting one, only because it is a high price tag. By pushing it out a year, it is going to cost us more operationally to sort of band-aid it, I guess, to get it through that extra year. So we can make it work if it's a cash flow issue, but it is a pretty old structure that does need some TLC. So hence why it's not even a retrofit. It's a completely new structure that we are building.
But that was bumped by a year, it looks like.
That's correct. And
that's just because we want to limp through, even though it's going to cost a little bit more, just to deal with the cash flow of this year. Is that, or of next year, I guess?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I had a question about Public Works 031. And when you look at Public Works 031, it's like 6.2 million in 21. And then 4.775 million, and then 5 million, and then 4.77 right across the board. So my question is really, it seems like there's some guesswork there on the 4.77. So my question is, how do we come up with that total number, I guess, of that whole line, that 10-year number? Because you must have said over a 10-year period, we're going to have to spend 50 million or whatever, and then you've tried to divide it here, in 2004 on just equally. So how did you come up with the large number, the overall number? And that applies to most of these projects.
So Councillor Watkins, Tony here with Public Works and Facilities. The 4.7 was basically an industry stand on 3% of facility replacement cost. Unfortunately, we hadn't done all of the facilities in terms of a facility condition assessment prior to that 4.7. The 4.7, as you may recall, was part of a increase in the reserves that implicated some tax changes. So we are continuing with our facility audits. In the backgrounder, you'll see that I think we'll have 39 more buildings done. And after each sort of 100-foot assessment is done based on year of build, expected life of various components, et cetera, that's what forms the gross picture of life cycle costing. And then what we do is we drill down to this year we're doing St. Albert Place, Fountain Park Pool, et cetera. And as we did Ainsdale Connects last year, we dig down a little deeper to find out what we can retain, simply not replace just because it's if it's a 12-year expected life and it's still good after 12 years, we're not going to replace it if it's still good. So we do that physical equipment and condition assessment on a secondary detail after the first one. So the 4.7 was to set up the reserve because we never had one before, based on a industry standard of 3% of total facility replacement cost.
That's a very good answer, Tony. Thank you very much. So the 6.2 then, those are things that we have to get done this year to maintain the service level, and things that we can't band-aid anymore. We just have to replace. That's your opinion.
Well, no, the biggest impact of the 4.7 to the 6.2 was because the 3% did not include transit facilities at that time. So these are elements that weren't part of the 3%, and we're gradually bringing them in as we complete more of the assessments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Those are my questions. Once again, is there anybody else who has any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there somebody who wants to move the recommendation on page, I think it's on page 8. Councillor Broadhead.
Okay, I recommend that the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council, 1, that the 10-year municipal RMR capital plan provided as an attachment to the June 9th, 2020 agenda report titled 10-year municipal RMR capital plan be received as information. 2, that council members submit any postponed motions for proposed amendments to the 10-year municipal RMR capital plan to administration by June 17th, 2020. 3, that administration prepare backgrounders for proposed amendments to the 10-year municipal RMR capital plan and present to council at the July 6th, 2020 meeting for consideration of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Do you have any opening comments, or do you wish to enter into debate?
Well, you know what, it's this is the presentation of the capital plan to our committee. We've had some opportunities to ask some questions around process and impact, and now it goes to the rest of council for their review of the entire plan, and then we'll see if anybody has any ideas for amendments, and we'll debate them on the 6th of July.
Okay, anybody else have any comments, debate? Okay, seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed is none, that's unanimous. Okay, we can move on to item 6.2, the 10-year utility RMR capital plan. Diane, do you have any further comments?
No further comments.
Are there any questions of Diane on the utility RMR capital plan? Okay, I see none. Going once, going twice. There, it's gone. No questions. Is there somebody who's willing to move the recommendation on page 158? Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. The 10-year utility RMR capital plan provided as an attachment to the June 9th, 2020 agenda report titled 10-year utility RMR capital plan be received as information. Number 2, that council members submit any motions for proposed amendments to the 10-year utility RMR plan to administration by June 17th, 2020. And number 3, that administration prepare backgrounders for proposed changes to the 10-year utility RMR plan and present to council at the July 6th, 2020 meeting for consideration of approval.
you have any open comments or wish to go into any debate or discussion?
I don't think so. I think it's all been covered, and just thanks to administration for the clarity of the package for us to work from. So,
Anyone else want to say anything? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Those in favor? And once again, that's unanimous. We are now on item 6.3, front back residential combined units and other planning topics. And we have a speaker on this one. Are we bringing the speaker in now or later?
I'm right here, sir.
I thought we had an outside speaker.
Oh, I'm here as well, just at your leisure.
There you go, Courtney. So would you like to go first, Courtney?
Sure, I can. I'll pop my video on so you have a face to go with this.
Proceed.
Thank you all for allowing me to speak. I will apologize to start. I am very unfamiliar with the committee structure. I don't watch this the way I do all the other public hearings, so just put me back in line if I'm stepping out of it.
A little more than council, so.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure that I was part of the call today for two reasons. One, to answer questions if they came up, because I know that this is something that council has been looking at and admin's been working on for quite a long time. But the second item is actually not the front back zoning itself. It's the housing diversity piece that is part of that package. Housing diversity for our industry is really such an important issue for us right now. We're looking at a situation where we have required density targets that we have to meet. And in reviewing the municipal development plan draft, you know, St. Albert wants to see development of communities that still have a similar feel to the existing St. Albert. And in most cases, that means primarily single family homes. Ground oriented units are still very, very desirable. And we're a little sensitive to how, you know, the market might look post coronavirus. There's some speculation that that ground orientation, as opposed to an apartment style unit, might see a real lift in popularity again. Not that it hasn't been popular, just that we have seen the market shifting somewhat recently, seeing that younger people are more willing to, or perhaps just more required by their finances to choose something like an apartment style house. We expect that we'll see a swing back to a real interest in ground orientation again. Other goals identified in the municipal development plan are affordability of market housing and a desire to move to a lower carbon footprint. And those are both items that we can generally address using some of the new diverse housing options that have been outlined in the report that you have in front of you. I mean, just to speak to today's topic, RMR, anything that lowers our carbon footprint by decreasing the amount of front feet on a lot also then translates into usually a more efficient RMR situation for the city down the line. So as an industry, it's just of the utmost importance to us that we see that as it's coming to committee and not coming to council right away in terms of the housing diversity component, we just really need to see some direction going to administration supporting increased housing diversity, because it's very key in us being able to support the draft MDP that's coming forward. Our industry feels like we need these tools in our toolkit to be able to support and achieve the goals that are being suggested by the current MDP draft. And I mean, I know with the front backs that there's been a fair amount of support for that from council. And that's wonderful. Again, it's a piece of the puzzle for us. But when you look at something, and I know it's probably the most contentious piece of the housing diversity
with the group here. It's the 0 lot line, and front back duplexes. I mean, we use as an industry very, very strategically. I mean, it's in particular applications, but it doesn't represent a huge proportion of our market servicing. Whereas if you take a look at 0 lot line housing in the Edmonton region, it's become the largest segment of the new home buying population. It's not just taking the place of some of the more traditional single family homes. It's also becoming a replacement for a lot of duplexes and townhomes as an option. And I was just concerned that this is an item that would be going for some direction to committee without engaging the industry, to the level that I think it needs to be engaged. And so I wanted to be here to speak to that because, closing the door to something like 0 lot line product right now, it sends a very strong message to our industry about how we're supposed to compete in the region. And it raises a lot of concerns for us. Just taking a look at the city of Edmonton in the past year, 0 lot line was the product that was brought on to the largest degree. And it was brought on using a zoning called RLD, residential low density. And that is a single zone that allows for everything from lanes to no lanes, traditional style single family homes, 0 lot line and duplex, all in kind of an organic mix. And that's been a really powerful tool that's been created for us in the Edmonton land use bylaw. It was a zoning that was written by Stantec for Brookfield a couple of years ago. And once it was implemented in their subdivision, it got rolled out across the city. And as I mentioned, it's now how almost all of the lower density zoning is moving ahead, because it provides so much flexibility for land developers to come in and meet the changing demands of the market in a much more real-time fashion. So I just wanted to put a few of those things on your radar here this morning or this afternoon, and see if some of these items come up through your discussion in the meeting here. And if you've got some questions about how the industry feels or how the market might respond to some of these changes being suggested, I am available and at your disposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee's a little more relaxed, so maybe what we can do is if anybody has any questions of Courtney right now, you can ask them, and then maybe you could hang on to the call, and we'll let administration make a presentation, and then there may be additional questions of you at that time, if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Okay, Councillor Broadhead, followed by Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Courtney. I appreciate you coming in. Always enjoy your perspective. So we've traditional condo development, traditional apartments, sometimes they're homeowner associations, those sorts of things. From a developer's perspective, what's the imperative? Fee simple versus, maybe just go through when you consider development, how do you make the decision on how you're going to build and what you're going to build for?
Well, most of our information in terms of market demand comes from our builders. So we have, in any given subdivision, we either have a set builder group or we have an open builder group where lots can be sold to the public. But either way, it's them who actually has the primary contact with the new home buyer. So as the market starts changing, I get my information generally by touching base with a lot of the show home representatives and saying, well, what have your sales been like? What have people been responding positively to? What have been the challenges? What's made people fall through for their financing, et cetera? What's made people walk away from deals? Sometimes our new home buyers come to us with new ideas. And then I guess that introduces a little bit of an element of risk if we're building a specific lot product to meet their individual needs. But our goals usually, and certainly administration at the City of St. Albert, is in line with this. I mean, we have the opportunity to do things like direct control zones, but St. Albert, as opposed to going with a lot of direct control zoning, has generally looked at implementing new zones so that if something is available to one party, it could possibly be available to other parties as well. And, you know, I think that's a good strategy. But for us, really, I mean, when I take a look at the momentum of change as to what's been demanded by our new home buyers over the last about 15 years, is how long I've been working with Strata, you know, there used to be a lot of consistency and change was slow. But now with the kind of builders that we have who are always looking to be ahead of the curve and come up with something new and niche that meets market needs in a better way, with us having to apply for our subdivision and zoning so far in advance, it does create a challenge for us. And likewise, when you're speaking about homeowners associations and condominium fees, I mean, we avoid them where possible because they still do scare a proportion of the market away, because it's another cost that could inflate if they are working with budgets. That being said, there are certainly good reasons to use them in some cases. If you're doing a specialized community that provides a higher level of services, that obviously needs to be funded in some fashion, and it's not fair to ask taxpayers to fund that. But that being said, I still see that most of the market feels more comfortable being on a fee simple kind of basis. It's one less cost that they have to worry about inflating without them necessarily having much control.
Okay. So one of the things that people love to come to St. Albert around to live is this whole idea of small town feel, tree canopies, beautiful community, all of those things. So housing diversity, do you think those two ideas are compatible?
Oh, I think they're like more than compatible. I think that by allowing for more housing diversity, it gives us more flexibility in terms of how to creatively achieve the end goals rather than just prescriptively achieve them. Like if you have a multi-site and somebody is planning it, for example, if they can orient the living units in new, different, more creative ways, it can sometimes lead to different layouts or different amounts of green space where it's not do the same thing the same way, but think of new ways to make sure that you're more effectively achieving the end goal as opposed to just following the same procedure.
Appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Hanson, good question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Courtney, for being here. Nice to see you. I'm finding that the report is a little bit conflicting because the attachment kind of goes through each of the product, and under zero lot line, it says that it's not needed in St. Albert, and that was industry feedback. So, but then when you look at the agenda report, it says overall what really industry wants is nimbleness and diversity. So I guess when it comes to things like the zero lot line, is this a big city kind of a product like for Edmonton, or are we seeing mid-sized cities and more rural areas take up this product? And maybe you could comment on that, because obviously what we want to do at the end of the day is provide something for our residents and invite them in, but it also has to be cost effective. We have to be able to service it properly. We need to be able to get the services to them properly. Yeah, so maybe just on that particular product, maybe you could comment.
Yeah, first, I'm just taking a look. It says St. Albert does need this product. I was looking, I thought it might be a typo, but no, it says it does. I was like, I was part of the feedback. I know we were very vocal on this one particular housing product. But no, it's not just a big city product at all. In the Edmonton region, every other regional municipality is at least pilot projecting zero lot line. And although he's not on the call today, Mike Erickson has come from Fort Saskatchewan, where we were actually involved in pilot projecting zero lot line with them. Just last year, we serviced a stage of them. And actually, a number of the councillors there have tweeted about it here in the last few weeks, because the finishing work's just going up on the exteriors of those homes. And if anything, I would say, no, this should be a product that I would think would be embraced even more in the smaller municipalities, because a lot of people choose to move out to the smaller municipalities so that they can afford a little more house for their dollar. And I know these seem like a small product compared to a lot of St. Albert's current product, but you have to remember that it's somebody who's looking at this quite likely in comparison to, say, a duplex. And so having something that is a single family home at a very similar price point to a duplex, I think that there will be no shortage of interest in that in a smaller municipality. And likewise, some of the things that we are able to meet more effectively through use of this product, such as, like I said, density. Smaller municipalities are also having to look at increased density. And again, if we're trying to increase density without putting in, say, a bunch of apartment buildings, this is a great way to increase the density while still providing a housing product that is much more comfortable and familiar to people who are looking for single family homes. I think when we went on the bus tour, it was pretty apparent that the house itself, a zero lot line house, is absolutely no different than a single family house when you're inside it. It's just that the unit is shifted so that it's the side yard that is reduced on one side. And so I think it will fit in very, very well with smaller communities and the kind of housing product that people look for and expect to see in smaller communities. But it also has benefits, like I said, of letting us get more dense without feeling really different. It helps us address environmental concerns, because again, always trying to shrink that amount of infrastructure needed per dwelling unit. So still feels the same on that side too. I mean, the house itself feels the same, but when you use about 3 feet less of road and pipe to service it, it makes an impact on the environmental side that isn't felt by the new home buyer. So it's kind of invisible that way. So I think, if anything, this product should be most desirable in smaller communities that want to still have that single family home feel predominantly.
Thanks. I don't know where I just saw does not, but obviously I'm glad that you corrected me, because
I was like, how can that be?
Well, and I was confused with the document. I'm like, I don't know what we're trying to be told here. So
no, it's
that's
a
good.
huge product for us right now. So all of our builders are getting into producing some of this product. Some of them are doing almost exclusively this product. And so, when we're going out and trying to convince builders that St. Albert is a good place to be investing their money, having a product like this that they've achieved a lot of success with in the region really speaks to them.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me. And yeah, that puts the context in place a little better for me. So appreciate that. Thanks.
I can just add a little bit about zero lot line housing. It's nothing new. I'm quite a bit older than Courtney, and back in 1989 when I worked at Stantec, We approved zero lot line housing in Burnwood down in the woods, and it spoke right to affordability. And at that time, it was a house on a I think a 10-meter wide lot. So the only difference is the lot is this wide and the house is all shoved over to one side. And then there's a maintenance easement on the additional lot. So you can go over there and maintain the house. And those houses sold for $99,900. And we sold to 40 houses in one day. So, I mean, it speaks right to affordability. It's nothing new. It's been around for, like I said, that was 1989. So it's been around for 31 years already. Those are just my comments. Any other questions? So Courtney, what we'll do is we'll have you hang around, and since this is a little more relaxed than a council meeting, and hear from administration, and then there may be some more questions.
Great, I'll just mute until then.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, administration, Barb, I guess you can proceed now, or Christine, did you have something to say?
We'll just let Barb jump into it. It's a pretty big presentation and it has two parts. So stay tuned. Barb's got some good stuff for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. And thank you, Courtney, for providing feedback today. We really appreciate being able to work with industry on these issues so we can get some good results for St. Albert. I'm Barb, and I'm going to be presenting the Bylaw 21-2020 and some housing diversification topics to you today. We're going to have actually three parts to the presentation. So the first part is the bylaw that integrates the front-back combined units. The second part touches on the housing diversity topics. And the third part is just going to outline the recommendations that administration has. And just a note, the Planning and Development Department has been working with industry throughout this process. We hosted an online workshop in March where we presented our findings and sought industry feedback. And we've incorporated some of that feedback into the draft bylaw that's being proposed today. So our first part is the front-back combined access units. This is a semi-detached product where one dwelling has a front attached garage and the other dwelling has a rear detached garage. They require both the street and the lane access for vehicles. In terms of policy development, we looked at examples in the Edgemont and Starling neighborhoods in Edmonton and the Sienna neighborhood in Fort Saskatchewan. So this bylaw is being brought forward as follow-up on Council Motion CM 19014, which you can see on your screen. We're coming back to committee today with our proposal. It's important to note that administration doesn't recommend that this amendment take place. We've previously identified issues with the front-back housing. It includes the reduction of on-street parking and the potential for street trees and reduced space for power boxes and fire hydrants. There's also a bit of a decrease in pedestrian safety by introducing front driveways to an area that wouldn't otherwise have them. And there's a potential and increased long-term operational cost to the city while negating the benefits of having that lane infrastructure there. So our bylaw that we're presenting proposes to add a new district to the land use bylaw. We've called it the Residential Front Back, or RFB district. It allows for semi-detached product and duplex product with dual vehicle access. The builders have the option of coming off the lane entirely or alternating coming off the public road and the lane. Single detached homes are also permitted within the new district, but they have to access off of the rear lane. A new district was chosen instead of making changes to the RXL district because the purpose of having RXL was to provide high quality boulevards with no curb cuts that is pedestrian friendly and offers good street parking. Administration didn't want to take away the purpose of RXL by allowing curb cuts where there wouldn't be any. So this new RFB district was created. The RFB district is similar to RXL in terms of floor area, lot widths, lot area, lot coverages, building height, and the side yard setback, but it differs from RXL in terms of vehicle access and front yard setback. So I'm going to talk about the features of this new district. One of the items of concern that we had was ensuring the garages are grouped to maximize parking on the front street. So on the bottom of the slide, you can see our preferred configuration with the green arrows where the units with the front attached garages are placed side by side and the units with the rear detached garages are placed side by side. From the city's perspective, this regulation helps to maximize the amount of on-street parking that's going to be available. There will be a few transition areas, however, where garages aren't grouped. This is because the ends of the block need to be a rear detached garage product, so the first driveway after the intersection is placed further away from the corner. Grouping of garages isn't a new requirement for St. Albert. This regulation builds upon existing policies within our land use bylaw. Even though vehicle access can be from a lane, pedestrian access has to be from the front street. These dwellings must have an entry door facing a street or a side yard that's accessible by the public road. From our understanding, this is something that the product can already accommodate. And the last feature of the new district is the mixed front yard setback. So to reduce the prominence of front attached garages on the street, we are proposing a lessened front yard setback for product with rear detached garages. The dwelling will be allowed to be 4.5 meters from the front property line. This is shown in blue on the slide. So the product with front attached garages must remain set back 6 meters from the front property line. The rationale for the 6 meter distance is to permit a driveway that can allow for a mid-sized vehicle to park without overhanging onto the sidewalk. And that's shown in pink on the slide. So we're on to the second part of the presentation, which is the housing diversity topics. Our purpose in exploring these options would be to add housing product that could provide market affordable options in St. Albert. So the first product to touch on is shallow wide lots. The opportunity we see here is to accommodate alternative lot configurations where a standard lot depth might be difficult to achieve. Industry indicated this would be something they are interested in seeing being implemented in St. Albert's land use bylaw. The next topic is suites and multifamily products. The opportunity we see is to gently increase density in new and existing neighborhoods, provide a mortgage helper to homeowners, and expand the rental offering. Industry indicated that permitting suites would give homebuyers the confidence to know in the future that they can create an income from their home. It gives buyers a level of certainty about the investment that they're making. With tiny homes, the opportunity we see is to accommodate very compact, fully serviced small homes on permanent foundations, potentially in a Homes for Heroes style supportive housing project. Industry feedback on this was that the city should be open to the idea, but members aren't actively pursuing it at this time. Our next topic is zero lot line. With this product, there's a single family dwelling placed on a side property line, so it has no side yard setback on that one side. The other side is typically set back at least 5 feet. The opportunity we see is to increase density in greenfield neighborhoods while still maintaining a single family home. Industry feedback on this product was that it's strongly in demand. The builders noted that increasing amounts in sales of Edmonton or zero lot line homes, and it's one of their most popular products to date. And our last topic is the back-to-back fee simple townhomes. Our land use bylaw currently allows condoed units, but this would allow for a fee simple ownership model with no condo fee. Feedback from industry was positive on this product. The main comment being that if we want to meet our density targets, products like this can help. And then we're on to our recommendations. So administration has 2 recommendations today. The first would be that the committee recommend to council that bylaw 21-2020 be brought forward to the first council meeting in December 2020. We've chosen that date so that we can have additional talks with industry, incorporate any other feedback that they might have. And our second recommendation is that administration continue to investigate new housing products and bring back potential further regulations by the end of Q2 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Barb. That was a great presentation. Can you go back to the slide with the that shows the attached garages and the detached garages? Yeah, right there. I just wondered if there are actually, like, what's the demand like for a detached garage? Because this is how it would get configured, right? In the RFP. So if I were a homeowner, would I guess the advantage is that your house is bigger, but your garage is not attached. Is that what I'm seeing here?
The reason that we actually did this specifically was for the semi-detached dwellings. So we wanted to bring the product with the rear detached garage a little closer to the street. They won't actually get any more lot coverage at all with this. It just brings the dwelling further closer to the street. And then the other side of the semi-detached product, the garage door would look less prominent because it would be a bit further back. Does that answer your question?
Just to expand a little, Barb, the other positive that we see with this configuration and that we've heard from both industry and from users, some of the feedback we've heard is the staggered backyard is also enabled. So there's a little bit more privacy regarding the backyard. And also one of the main costs regarding building is concrete, and having a reduced need for concrete in the back is helpful for affordability as well.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks very much.
Okay, are there any questions? Any other questions? Councillor Broadhead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just go right back to the beginning where you talked about a new zone, RFB, I think it was. Right. So what we heard earlier was this idea of a toolbox, if you will, to build within a particular district and provide a diversity of housing. How do you contrast that with what you're presenting here in terms of a front back district? I'm assuming that only front back would be allowed within that district, and there wouldn't be other build forms allowed in it. How do you contrast this with this idea of sort of mixed building within one particular district?
So that's a great question. The reason why we had another district proposed was just so that we didn't negatively influence the RXL. So you're right in that this still permits semi-detached, duplex, and single-family homes. They can either only come off the lane or come off the front street and the lane. There is no townhousing in this district, so technically the RXL has more product options, but all of them are required to come off of the lane.
The other component, Councillor Broadhead, is that we are, because if committee recommends that we continue looking at additional product, we'd be looking at filling in additional products within these new districts to see where they're most appropriate as well.
Okay, so getting back to the question that I asked Courtney earlier on, this idea of build form in St. Albert and its compatibility with sustaining this idea of small town feel, tree canopies, green space, park space. Maybe speak to how these two, how this new zone will help, I guess, or not.
Well, and one of the drawbacks to the new district is because there will be front garages, there is reduced opportunity for street trees. So for example, in the RXL district, where none of the homes are allowed to access onto the front street, you have more opportunity to have that tree canopy. Here, you're going to have to plant in between the driveways, essentially. So that's one of the drawbacks of having that dual access in this district.
And I think this is why administration is recommending, should you want to move forward with this district, that you group the garages, so it will help retain some of those values that we know St. Albert people really love about their community. They're the street trees and the canopies and the small town feel to it. So while it's not, I guess, from our perspective, perfect, it does, we have written regulations to help preserve some of those values.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that. Can you go right, I think, to the probably the second last slide where you had fee simple townhouses? This one, yes. Okay, so as I understand it, these, well, you can't see my cursor. I guess I shouldn't use it. The laneways in between, those now, after it's all purchased and the developer turns the development over to the city, those lanes now become City of St. Albert responsibility to maintain and repair, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
They will technically be streets.
Named and addressed, the whole bit, right?
Yes.
These are not back lanes.
Nope.
Okay. Fair enough. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Jolly?
Thank you. So I guess along those same lines, the reason why we're not adding this product to the existing RXL is just because we think it's going to take away from those districts. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, we thought that by introducing curb cuts to a place where there wouldn't be any, because there shouldn't be any front drives in RXL, that it interrupts the pedestrian environment for those that are walking along the area. It also has, because there are more curb cuts, reduced opportunity for the street trees and for power boxes and hydrants and things like that. And if we're going to be taking over the infrastructure for a lane, it's going to cost the city long term.
But that doesn't happen in this new district?
No, we will still acquire the lanes, so they will be a long-term cost.
The other component, Councillor Jolly, if you don't mind, is we don't have any RXL at this point currently built. We have some planned, but we don't have any built. And one of the things that administration has, part of the reason for the recommendation is to determine what the impacts may be, seeing these products a little bit more side to side with the two different districts. Part of it is about lessons learned, and then maybe we can make tweaks to incorporate them, and coming back, should we notice that they run perfectly well in parallel, we might look at making amendments or coming back to committee to ask for that. But part of this is about learning from the built product that hasn't actually occurred yet within St. Albert.
So we're just being cautious.
We're being a bit cautious, yes.
Okay, and I guess, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow it, I've just got a question for Ms. Jensen, if she's still in the room.
Sure. Right ahead, Courtney. You're still...
Yeah, Courtney, I'm wondering, in terms of kind of the impact of having those two separate districts, can you comment on kind of the timelines for switching over, or kind of how that impacts your building seasons?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that this comes up, because I think that was our only real comment back to administration after our review as well. It was, our expectation had kind of been that this would be achieved under the RXL district. And while we can accept it being separate for the time being, if we need to, we would probably push for that in the future, because rezoning and redistricting and everything that goes along with that, it is about a 6-month period for us to get from one end to the other. So having that additional flexibility to just zone as RXL, but be able to either do everything off the lane or to combine some front back units and make that decision a little bit closer to servicing, it is helpful for us, because that decision changes along the way, and that 6-month approval process puts you outside of a summer construction period, then it bumps you by a year. So we would love to see something that incorporated the two, whether that's right away or whether that's down the line. That is something we would like to see.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I see Adrian, not me. Does Edmonton have it as two separate? I'm getting the impression that Edmonton has it all in, I'm talking to Courtney now. That Edmonton has it all in one district, or how do they separate these two products out, or do they not?
Edmonton has this product available in a number of different districts. Edmonton also has a number of different districts. They have a number of different districts that are actively used, and then a number of different districts that are kind of antiquated and no longer used. So the answer is both. You can do it both ways in Edmonton. You can zone it in a way that would only allow for, well, I guess that's not true. You can zone it through an RPL, which is just a generic lane zone that only takes you up to a single family kind of and duplex use. Or you could do it through the RLD, which is that mixed use that I was speaking of that has become very popular. I think those are the only two, unless you go to something like I think an RF5 might. I'd have to look back and take a look. I haven't used an RF5 in a long time, but that's what they use for townhomes that are off of a lane, or an RMD. Edmonton has a lot of land use zones.
Residential.
Can I ask one more question to Courtney, Councillor Watkins?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so out of curiosity, do you find it more beneficial to have a lot of different land, like how Edmonton has so many different zones? Is that more helpful, or is it more confusing than having the simpler versions that St. Albert has?
Certainly in the city of Edmonton, the trend has been they have a lot, but none of them stop existing. So all of the newer zones that have been adopted in the last little while, such as the RMD and the RLD, they do allow for more uses in a single zone. And so St. Albert likewise has moved in that direction. St. Albert and Edmonton haven't done it in quite the same way. So each one has some uses that are more grouped and some uses that are less grouped. But overall, I would say that as land developers, we love a use where we can decide what kind of actual lots and built units can go into it as close to market absorption as possible. So, you know, if there was literally, and I'm not saying that this is the right fit for St. Albert, but if there was a residential land use that allowed us to do any kind of residence that we wanted, that would be our favorite, because we could zone everything as that right from the get-go, and you wouldn't have to worry about, what if I change my mind on what kind of zone I want?
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. That's it.
Okay, are there any other questions of either Courtney or administration? Councillor Bradhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just one question. I had forgot to ask it earlier. If you can go back to the screenshot where you had the option to provide a suite. Yes, this one. That doesn't look too aesthetically pleasing to me. How does and I don't know how else to say that. So what sort of considerations would go into allowing a suite? And this probably an administrative response, I guess. What do you think of my response to that? Is that germane to our conversation here, or is it just me?
No, I understand. It's not a particularly good picture, and it doesn't really illustrate the concept very well, because we already allow suites in single family dwellings in certain cases. And this was only supposed to focus on permitting suites in multifamily product like semi-detached or duplexes. So you're right, it's a very bad picture and I apologize for that.
I was just trying to find some better photos online. I don't have them at the exact moment, but if you start going into some of the neighborhoods and newer neighborhoods in Edmonton, or even the infill neighborhoods within Edmonton, you've started to see builders incorporate the suite within a semi-detached product. And whether it be a secondary suite through the garage or in the basement of the home, both of those products are becoming quite popular to have. So we can look for better photos should we bring it back to council.
You've heard my point. Thank you for that.
I was just planning on moving in.
You need a basement suite.
Well,
Yeah.
the one that we saw with Mr. Lukasik, isn't that something similar? It's above a garage, but and it's detached, but it's similar.
It's not quite that big though, I don't think.
No.
Single garage. Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, I guess on this, this beauty here, what's the parking situation like for some of these things? I mean, if you'd have to have, I guess you'd have to be able to allow for parking for everybody that's in the house. So tell me how that works.
Sure. So when we were initially talking about this concept, we also thought that there would still have to be some sort of parking regulation, because you're right, additional people living in the area are going to need it. Edmonton hasn't gone that way though. I think they've reduced parking requirements for suites, just to let you know.
It also,
Okay, so maybe it's a good product to have near a bus line.
yes, that's actually one of the things. It also depends on if the built form, if you've got no curb cuts or access from the front, it also enables increased on-street parking as well. So it depends on if you've got rear access or front access. So that would be some of the items we would be looking at and developing those regulations and then speaking with industry about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there somebody who's willing to move the recommendation?
I can move it if you want.
Okay, Councillor Hanson.
Just need to get back to it.
21.
Yeah. That the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council that bylaw 21-2020, being Amendment 170 to the Land Use Bylaw, be brought forward to the first council meeting in December 2020. And number 2, that administration continue to investigate new housing products and prepare where determined to diversify residential built form and improve housing affordability regulations to present back to the Community Growth and Infrastructure Committee by the end of Q2 2021.
Okay, do you have any opening comments, Councillor Hanson?
You know, I guess the only stumbling block that I have, I appreciate the report and I appreciate that we're moving towards more diversity in housing. I think that's great, especially for our development industry. I'm thinking about what Courtney was saying around not creating a separate zone, but including the front back within the RXL. And I guess through this debate, I'm not completely sold on that. I am listening to administration, but I wouldn't mind understanding where others sit with that, because maybe we want to reconsider an amendment to, or in addition to this recommendation around keeping that in one zone. So that's my opening remarks now. Look forward to hearing what the two of you and others have to say about that.
Okay, anybody else wishing to enter into debate or comments? Councillor Broadhead.
Well, one of the things that I certainly appreciate about administration bringing forward is that what sold as a build form 40 years ago when I was looking for a house isn't the same as it is what people are looking for today. And so we as a community have to progress with the times. And so I think we need to stay current with our build forms and with our build zoning, if you will, to allow those build forms to exist. And so I appreciate what has been brought forward. I think in the end, we still want to build a community that our citizens appreciate and what they moved here for. We want to continue to do that, but I don't think what's been presented here is incompatible with finding a way to achieve that end. So looking forward to see what comes up even newer in the future going forward. And in December, we'll take a look at it. And as administration continues to look at new build forms, who knows what might show up. But I think we need to be open to whatever that might be.
Okay, anyone else care to comment? Okay, Councillor Hanson, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I'm going to leave the recommendations as is. And once again, our thanks to administration and thanks to UDI for showing up today and providing their comments.
Okay, I'd just like to add that thanks to administration and thanks to Courtney for coming down and making a presentation. We'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 6.4, capital funding campaigns, presented by Ashley Campbell.
Good afternoon, members of council. Today actually will be myself presenting. I'm pleased to be here today discussing the progress that has been made in relation to the topic of capital fundraising campaigns, and more specifically regarding joint venture partnerships, which may expand and enhance opportunities for future developments in our community. Joining me, I also have Jonathan Reed from engineering and Ashley Campbell from finance, and they'll be available to respond to any questions that you may have after my introductory remarks. The purpose of this report is to address the 2019 council motion to bring forward a policy regarding community facility partnerships. We have taken a corporate-wide and collaborative approach as we also consider future needs for capital development arrangements, which could include joint ventures. The proposed amended policy being presented today is a governance framework which allows the city greater flexibility in the provision of significant infrastructure development and operations sponsored by the city. In an effort to address the 2019 council motion, we further reviewed current policies, including the current finance P3 policy. Working through this policy, we have found that with some changes, we could serve both the original intent of the P3 policy and the intent of the council motion, which would be to provide a governance framework to manage relationships between the city and both the public and non-profit sector. In discussion with other departments, it also became evident that future capital infrastructure projects could also benefit from innovative project delivery methods and alternative capital financing arrangements. The amendments to the P3 policy include changing the name of the policy and adding or amending definitions where needed. Reference to P3 only exists now as one of the potential project delivery methods. Again, I'd like to stress that this policy would be for significant infrastructure developments and operations sponsored by the city. Within the policy, we have noted that if the value of the investment required from the city exceeds $5 million, then that would trigger a value for money assessment to take place. The amended policy would allow the city to take advantage of private sector innovation and the commitment of community organizations where the partners agree to share the risks and rewards of mutually beneficial infrastructure projects. And that concludes my presentation. And again, I do have Jonathan Reed and Ashley Campbell available, as well as a few of the other respective directors to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of Anna, Ashley, or Jonathan? I don't see any questions. Oh, Councillor Hanson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a few questions about this. I guess I'm asking the question why it's getting changed from P3 or public-private partnership to alternate capital financing. And the reason why I'm asking that question is that I feel like a public-private partnership is the end goal of the policy, while alternate capital financing is like a subset of a final goal. It feels like it's a method of financing, whereas a P3 is the end entity, if you get my drift. So I'm just wondering if I'm trying to understand how we got to this title.
Okay, the P3 is one project delivery method.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to look at is really looking at joint ventures and the opportunities that we could explore with alternative capital financing. And it would be up to whatever the different arrangements or the project delivery methods that came forward for this proposed project might be. We felt that alternative capital financing was a much more inclusive term, because again, P3 is only one of the methods that we would use.
Okay.
And Jonathan, feel free to jump in if you have anything to expand on that.
Yeah, because there's different types of contracts that could be entered, or different agreements between the other parties. With a P3, you're kind of forced into one sort of agreement between the three parties or the multiple parties. Whereas if you have some of the other options available, it doesn't kind of handcuff you to that one solution. It gives you multiple options and the abilities to negotiate with whatever kind of contract or with whatever kind of agreement you want between the parties. It could also lead to other alternative ways of being funded as well. So donations and other sort of things, where depending on how that contract is written, it might mean that the city has more say versus the private entity or anything like that, or the other entities.
Okay, I guess it's a matter of perspective, because I thought that the public-private partnership was a fairly broad entity, but yeah, thank you for that. And I do like the repurpose of the policy, that it's to broaden, to increase the joint venture opportunities. But I guess I'm going to zero in on the not-for-profit entity. I wonder if you look at the AR and it talks about funding contribution. Council in 2016 wanted to ensure groups requesting funding have also made a significant funding contribution towards this kind of financing. And I'm wondering if you can clarify if this makes it difficult for a not-for-profit to compete with a for-profit business, because a not-for-profit may not have cash at hand to do significant investment right away. They may have to go look for money to secure in order to move ahead with their project. And wondering if, sweat equity and volunteerism and business plans and things like that are considered part of the funding contribution in this policy.
Well, again, with this policy, P3 is still one of the options that you could use. And I think with a not-for-profit organization coming forward, they would probably be coming forward with potential grants that maybe the municipality may not be able to access, where the not-for-profit would. So it may not be their actual cash in hand, but it may be their ability to generate funds from other sources.
And I understand that, but I'm saying that there's probably going to be a time lag between proposing a project and getting the go-ahead to go and find and secure that funding. So I'm really trying to understand that this policy provides a level playing field for the not-for-profit as well as the for-profit in terms of a capital venture.
Correct. When we looked at the P3 policy, one of the initial things that we did change or looked at amending was that it did not include the not-for-profit. So when we looked at all policies available, there was not a way in which a not-for-profit really could compete and could move forward. So, I mean, the not-for-profit would have to determine how they would secure the funding. With using an alternative capital financing method, it would take a number of years because we are looking at a significant projects that we would do this for. So it would be a matter of bringing forward in the policy on the third page, we have the phases that were laid out for it. It'd be a matter of administration would bring forward to council a project that they feel might be a good possible project for alternative capital financing. I mean, that would be through probably 2 or 3 years of research, looking what other people are doing nationally, globally, as far as being able to do different types of alternative capital financing. And then it still would go through, it would take time to go through the whole process from council determining, yes, this could be alternative capital financing project, to then actually the procurement where we actually receive proposals and go through the value for money assessment, evaluate the proposals, to actually presenting again to council that we would like to move forward this way. So the not-for-profit organization certainly would have to be a fairly sophisticated organization in order to generate the funds. I mean, with P3 policies, there certainly are examples of not-for-profits that have used a P3 policy method. So I guess we would just have to open it up and see where it went.
Yeah, because the idea that a not-for-profit presents a proposal for consideration. I mean, I guess would they have to have all their funds raised in order for this policy to, would they have to have their funds raised in order for this policy to work? Because if they went through the public procurement, they raised all the funds and then it was a no, where does that leave a not-for-profit?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand what all that means for them, because they're not private and they're not for profit. So they're in a very different position. So in terms of the RFP process, and I'm just looking for clarification, in the AR, Capital Region Soccer Center and Library were mentioned. So these are the kinds of entities that would be subject to the RFP process?
Potentially they could be. If we were looking at doing some type of a municipal or community amenity facility, that might be one example.
Okay. And I'm almost done. Around the definitions, public sector comparator, is the intention of this policy to create any piece of infrastructure that may be coming forward to be held against the standard of a city facility? And what if it is actually an improvement to the city facility? Does that matter?
That's actually a good question, because that has had some discussion, and I guess it would be a part of weighing the pros and cons of whether it is in the best interest of the community. And does there a dollar value? Is it related to community good? Lots of things that would have to be taken into consideration with that.
Okay, well, I have some more questions, but I'll leave them for now.
Okay, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. How did you arrive at the $5 million sort of threshold?
We were looking for a dollar value that would be more related to a significant cost to the city. And certainly that amount is, if council or if committee so would like to change that dollar value, we are very much open to that. And I'm not sure, Mr. Scobel, if you have a comment on that or.
Yeah, it was more of a question, and I'll tell you the context, what drove the question. I got a phone call from the Canada Infrastructure Bank now has a Western representative working out west here. And he gave me a phone call. Why, I don't know, but he gave me a phone call. But during our conversation, one of the things that came up is that there's money to be had here, but it's like projects they're looking for not insignificant. And they want to move large amounts of money. So my question was first, why 5 million? But secondly, do you believe that the policy that you've got here is nimble enough to be able to respond so that that we can move fast enough, I guess, to get into the Canada Infrastructure Bank and access some funds that are available? They're trying to push money out, and but the hook is always there's got to be a private component to it. So, care to comment?
Sure. Yeah. No. The policy really does provide a governance framework. So it provides a method which to move a project to receive approval from council to move ahead with alternative capital financing. So if council had a project that they were certainly desired to move quicker, really truly the first step is to have council approve to move forward that way, and then we could go right into the procurement process. So again, it's a framework. It's not it's providing that governance structure for it.
Okay. All right. Let me get my head around that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Hanson, did you have some more questions you want to ask? Okay, you're done. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Is there somebody willing to move the motion? Councillor Broadhead?
Let me get it here. I recommend that the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council that the proposed amendments to policy C-FS-17 public-private partnership P3 as outlined in attachment 1 be approved. Secondly, that the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council that the proposed amendments to policy C-FS-17 public-private partnership serve to address the intent of Council Motion AR 19-172, which was to bring forward a council policy regarding community facility partnerships.
Okay, do you have any opening comments or debate?
Well, it's an interesting policy. I think it achieves the end. I appreciate the rewrite. There were certainly some questions around how we'll action it, and I think we'll only find that out as we actually do it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Having said that, I think it meets the intent of the original motion. It gives us guidance on how to go forward. So I certainly don't have any problem supporting the motion that's before us.
Okay, anybody else have any comment? Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, well, thanks for administration for bringing this forward, and you know, it's a complex policy. There's a lot in it. I don't think today I can support that. I don't think I can support it because I don't see it as necessarily being an easy thing for those entities that have money doing very well, such as not-for-profits. I think that not-for-profits have great ideas. They have a lot of sweat equity. They have a lot of volunteerism, and they can make things happen. But I don't think that this policy necessarily is the right vehicle for them to be able to move their own infrastructure ideas forward when they would be competing against private companies with lots of money. So yeah, I understand that. I'm sure I'll be the lone person against this, but that's my thoughts at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Broadhead to close, or anybody else want to enter into debate? I don't see anybody else. Councillor Broadhead to close.
Yeah, well, certainly appreciate the comments, Councillor Hanson. I think from my perspective is this is a project that the city initiates, and we're looking for alternative financing options in order to achieve a particular end. I don't think that not-for-profits are necessarily precluded, but nonetheless, it provides a policy within which we can take a look at different financing options to achieve a goal where it's usually big money on the table. So I think we should look at all options to achieve our ability to build something for the benefit of the community. And here's a financial option or financial option policy or policy option that I think serves the community.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I'd have to agree. This is just going to allow us different ways to find funding. And at a time when funding is shrinking, we need some different alternatives. Okay, we'll call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed?
Your mic is off.
Yeah, I'm always very careful on the mute now. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. The next item is adjournment. Can we have a motion for adjournment? Councillor Broadhead, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See you later.
You.
Bye.